Alright, for this last section of the video, we're going to oil, dye, antique, and finish the edges. So I typically use saddle oil right here. All I'm going to do, I'll let this dry overnight by the way, but let's go ahead. Oh my goodness, I put way too much on that pad. That's alright. Get the excess off, and we're just going to get a nice coat on this here. And just like that. So all I'm going to do is sit here and let this soak in, and we will come back when it's ready to dye. While we give it some time and the oil has all soaked in, you can see how it looks now. So we're going to go for a two-tone look. So we're going to go ahead and dye the background black. So like I said in my previous video, I do have a separate video on how I antique and everything, but we're just going to go over in this video. So let me grab the black dye. We'll put a little bit here in the shot cup. That should be plenty. So I like to use brushes. So I usually use two here, a bigger one and a smaller one. Sometimes you get some tight crevices. It can be hard to get that brush in, and just having a smaller brush makes it a lot easier. So I'm going to go through first with the small brush, and I'm just going to get all these little corners that are normally hard to get. I'm going to do it with this small brush very carefully. So me personally, I like to use Fibing's Pro Dye. It's just something I personally prefer. I know some people do like to use just the, I just think it's called a regular leather dye. But I think there's like a certain way you gotta use a regular dye. You gotta like wipe it off or clean it up. Something like that, I don't know, this is just the easiest way for me. You can hear my phone buzzing away over there. Let me make sure this is on the camera. My bad. I hope I didn't miss out on too much. Okay, so now that we got pretty much all those tight corners all dyed, we can go through with our bigger brush and really start filling it in. So I'm going to take a little bit of this dye here. Kind of tap some of this excess off on the side. You don't want to have too much because you don't want to bleed up on your project. We're just going to go ahead and go around this. Start here. And then work our way around this project. So might have to go back around a second time. Sometimes you will get spots where it's a little bit lighter. So typically I will go around twice. Just kind of fill any spots that weren't dyed evenly. It's not too hard to do whenever you get to the black dye, but sometimes when you work with like light brown or stuff like that, you gotta really be careful because you will get blotches in your dye. But usually if you oil it, it helps the dye spread more evenly. Just in my opinion, through what I've done in my process, I've noticed if I don't get a good oil in, it's a lot more blotchy. So we're going to work our way all the way around this pattern. Oh, got a tight corner right here. I forgot to get with that brush. Go figure. Grab that right now. And I typically just, I buy my brushes from Hobby Lobby. I do like Hobby Lobby a lot. I buy my zippers for my projects there, my brushes, and sometimes I just find cool stuff for the shop. So I do love me a Hobby Lobby trip. Okay, we're just about done with the first coat. And making sure you bevel right whenever you bevel this is going to help that dye from bleeding up over it. So I'm just going to go back through and do a quick second layer. Just like that. You don't need as much dye on the second layer, just kind of going over top of it again to make sure you get one nice clean dyed border. So if you want to, you are more than welcome whenever you're tooling this up to add a border on this. I just typically don't use any borders in my tooling, just very rarely. I just like how it looks without a border. But that's all on you. Like I said, feel free to change the pattern how you like it and modify it, tool it differently. I'm just showing you how I do it, and hopefully to help any beginner out. Alright, so what we're going to do now, we're going to set this aside, and we're going to let this dye dry out, and then we're going to come back and antique it. So right there, that's what we're left with. The dye has dried out, so whenever I antique, I do not resist. You can, I just prefer not to. And whenever I antique, I typically use a wool shearling pad and then a rag as well. So for this, I'm going to be using Vibing's dark brown paste antique. Make sure you got gloves on, because if not, it's going to get in your hands, and then it's just going to be a pain. So all we're going to do, take a little glob of that with your glove, and then we're just going to go ahead and work that into our pattern. Don't get too carried away. You don't want a bunch of antique everywhere and all over your table. So just take it out as you need it. Just like that. Making sure you work in all those cracks and crevices. If not, you're going to be left with some dry spots, I call them. And that's pretty much just where the antique does not get into a tooling or a thumbprint, or it could be veiner, or really anything. You just want to double check and make sure you get all of that because you will notice it right away whenever you go to put your finish coat on. So we're going to go ahead, finish working this all around. You can see right there, that's what I'm talking about right there. That little piece right there didn't get any antique in there. You do not want that. Make sure it's in all this. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is to throw the cap back on. And we're going to take a rag and we're just going to polish the top off. Just on the top of it. We're going to go ahead and get the majority of that off. If you do resist this with tan coat, it will be a lot lighter, but this is just the look that I like. So just like that, flip it around. Now we're going to come back through with our wool pad, and we're going to go buff this out pretty good. Try to get as much of that antique up out as you can. You don't want too much antique in there, just what's in the actual tooled areas. If you have too much of this paste antique, it will crack and peel out, or at least it has for me in the past. And there we go. It's all cleaned up. We're going to go ahead and let that dry out, and we'll come back to the next step. The antique has dried, so what I like doing is using leather sheen. I buy this from Tandy Leather. And you can use tan coat. You can just buff it out real quick with tan coat and use that as a top coat. But I've always used this. I just like how it is. So let me go ahead and we're just going to do a quick little layer. It's like spray paint, not too thick, just something to do a quick cover coat. And that's it for this step. we'll let this dry out. It usually dries within like 30 seconds. And we'll go over there and I'll show you how I do my edges. So my first step is going to be peeling this tape off. I'm going to go ahead, peel all that off, nice and easy, and hopefully it won't rip. Just like that. Got a nice clean back. So we're going to run over to my burnish / sand machine, and we're going to sand these edges down and make them nice and clean. So go ahead, turn it on. You want to turn it down a little bit. If it's too fast, what will happen, it will actually burn the leather, and that's not what you want. So let's go ahead and sand this up. It's going to get nice and easy. I'm just going to try to get that dye and antique off that edge. And that's super important for when we go to burnish the edge. If there's any gunk or dirt or antique in there, it can screw this process up. So you want a fairly clean edge. You can do this with sandpaper as well. You don't have to have this. You can buy those sanding blocks from like Lowe's or Home Depot, or Walmart might even have them. But you just want to make sure this edge is nice and clean. Okay, do it one more time. Some of that dye won't come out. It's just that deep into the leather, but that's okay because we will dye these edges. So there we have it. Nice, pretty clean edge. So let's go over here and I will show you how I do my edges. I typically run size 0 Craft Tool Pro, but as you see, it fell off the table. So right now we're just going to use a number 2 beveler, just a craft tool, and we're going to go down here and go ahead and we're going to trim those edges back. Go ahead and flip it to the back. Do the same. All right, so let me reposition the camera for the next part. Let's get over here a little bit. So what I like using is Martin's mix. This stuff is flipping awesome. Want to make sure you shake it up beforehand. You can see that there. Shake it up, and I'll typically just use a sponge as an applicator. And let me open this up. I'm going to go ahead, and this sponge is pretty well used, I should say. Let me put it over the table so it doesn't drip over the place, like that. All right, we got some on our sponge. Let's go ahead, and we're just going to coat our edges. See, you got a little excess running over, but the good thing about this Martin's mix, it does not stain your leather. So that's not a problem. We'll just take a towel and we'll wipe that off. So I'm going to go back around one more time. Go all the way around. And so whenever you're burnishing your edge, you can use canvas or denim, or even one of those fancy burnish machines that I have. But for this video, we're going to hand burnish. We wipe the excess off. And all you're going to do, I like putting it up on the edge of a table. Grab your denim and then start working that back and forth. So you want to use, if you want to keep a nice clean edge or you don't want any dye or anything on it, I'd recommend using canvas. Sometimes the blue from the denim can actually soak into the actual edge, but for me it doesn't bother me too much because we're going to dye these edges. So just like that, that quick. I don't know how well you can see it from here, but I'll show you here in a second. That itself already has a nice shiny edge. I mean, that's why I love this Martin's mix. That is super smooth, super shiny. Let me go back through, flip it around, make sure this back side is done as well. I love this stuff. Martin's mix, I found them a little over a year ago. I actually met them down the show in Waco. Really good people. Definitely go check them out. American made, you know it. And it's fantastic. So yeah, there you have it. There's nice burnished edges. So the cool thing about Martin's mix, you can dye through it. So let's go over here. I'm gonna go grab another cupful of dye, just a black pro dye and a dauber, and we're going to dye these edges. So now, very carefully, I'm going to take a little bit of that dye, get it on our dauber, get that excess off. You don't want it bleeding off on your project. And now we're just going to go down this edge, and we're just going to dye the edge of that leather. Just like that. Flip it to the side. Just like that. Take your time. You do not want to slip at this part, especially if your border isn't dyed. That can be bad. Go ahead and do this side. And then we'll go back through and we will put one more coat on there. Just make sure that dye is set down deep in that Martin's mix. And what we're going to do now, we're going to let this sit and let this dye dry. And we're going to come back and finish those edges. Alright, now that our edges have dried, put a little bit more of that Martin's mix on this, and we're just going to repeat the same process. We're just gonna, let me turn this around. I'm gonna go ahead, throw a little bit on there, all the way around. I'm actually gonna let this sit for a couple of seconds before I start burnishing that. While we're doing that, we will put the lid back on our Martin's mix, so that way we do not tip it over. And yes, it has happened to me. That's why I'm saying that, saying to do that. Okay, let's throw these back here real quick. All right, same process. What we're going to do, go ahead and burnish that again. Flip it to the back. Do this side of the edge. And these edges look wonderful. I do need to make an updated video on how I do this because I have an older video, but it still shows me using the saddle soap and the beeswax. I'm gonna give this one last polish, and I will flip these around so you can see these edges. Okay, so here it is. You can see how nice those edges are. Super smooth, super glossy, just beautiful edges. And there's our finished piece. Okay folks, that's it for this video, or this video series I should say. So like I said, we started off with that pattern right there, and this is the end result. So hopefully some of you learned something from this video. I don't know if all the angles are perfect, but like I said, hopefully this helps someone out, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks for watching.